Howdy, folks. Good morning. Welcome to our closing keynote. For all of you who are still here, thanks for coming. For those that closed down the dueling piano bar, thanks for staying awake all night and being here still. It's been a great conference so far. I'm not going to wax poetically yet about what went on over the last few days, because it's time for what I think is going to be a really incredible closing. Before we get into that, I want to say huge thanks to Oars and American Rivers for a huge sponsorship and helping us put on this closing. It's a podcast with a river radius. I could pretend to know what I'm going to talk about in introducing this closing, but there's somebody who's going to be better equipped to do that. Please help me in welcoming to the stage somebody who's been a leader, a partner, and has worked tirelessly on the conservation of our public spaces and waterways. Join me in welcoming Mike Fiebig from American Rivers to the stage.
Thanks, Dave. All right, we got this thing on? Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it, and thanks to Sam for having me up here. And it's interesting. I'm Mike Fiebig. I'm a river conservationist and a 27-year raft guide too. It was really, it was guiding that got me into conservation. But before I go there, I want to say thanks. And it's awesome to be standing up in front of you all. It's said often when you talk in front of people, it's harder to talk in front of your friends and your family and your community sometimes, because you want to do right by them, right? There are a lot of people in this room I care about. A lot of people on stage here I care about, and I want to do right by y'all. So, I'm Mike Fiebig from American Rivers. I direct our river protection program for the Southwest U.S., based out of Durango, Colorado. I've been working for American Rivers for 14 years. Those that don't know AR, it's a national nonprofit. We've been around for about 50 years, and we believe that all rivers should be clean and healthy for people and wildlife, and that life depends on rivers. So we've got an awesome group of folks that get up every day and advocate for just that. But that's not really what I want to talk about. I got into rivers by probably a lot of the same way that you all did, by becoming a guide as a young person. And it changed my life. It was a place that I fit in. It's a place that I felt welcomed and belonged. And it's a place where I learned all the skills that I take to my current job. And for those in this room and those listening that can resonate with that, I want to thank you. And I also want to say how important river guides are to conservation. River guides might not know it, but they are on the front lines of river conservation. There are very few people in our modern world that are as connected to their rivers, to the outdoors. All of us as humans used to spend all of our time outdoors. We could see when things were changing. We could see when things needed help. And now there are very few of us that do. But the people in this room and the people that work for you are some of those people. And that means something. So thanks. It's really interesting, when I think back about Returning Rapids Project and River Radius and my connection to these folks, we all connected and became friends. Sam Carter, Mike DeHoff, Meg Flynn, this is down there, and myself, on a Cataract Canyon trip. All former guides, all at, inflection points in our lives. And then we've gotten really close and grown into all doing what we're doing right now, which you're going to hear about today. But when I think about the Returning Rapids Project, I think about connection. You're going to hear amazing stuff today about people deeply embedded into place and watching its changes and engaging others in documenting and studying those changes. But really it's about connection and reconnection. It's connection to place, it's connection to each other, it's connection to self ultimately. And when I look at projects like the Returning Rapids Project and citizen science initiatives and ways to dig into our rivers and our natural world and study them, they are gateways to conservation. You know, most people need a nudge, right? Like even those of us that spend a lot of time out in the outdoors. And projects like this give that nudge. You know, it engages people with curiosity and passion in their local world. And that's really important. So thank you all for doing what you are doing as well. Because yeah, like I said, whether your guides know it or not, people take their cues for how they interact with rivers for the rest of their lives from the trips they go on with you all. So thanks. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the folks up here from the Returning Rapids Project, you know, Mike, Davide, Isabel, and then of course, Sam Carter, my good friend and host of the River Radius podcast. Thank you.
Awesome. Check. Thanks, Mike. Are we on? Yes, we're on. Hey, everybody, welcome. I'm Sam. Thanks for being here. A room full of river people. It's totally intimidating and super exciting as we get started here. So we are here to hear about river guides and to hear a story about how a few river guides were guiding on a really big river and noticed a super small micro change that was happening, and how they all started to talk about that change. And all of them, I think it's 3 people, but Mike's going to clarify that. This small group of river guides starts talking about this micro change that they all notice, and they get really excited. They start taking pictures of it over time. They're comparing it, making notes, comparing it to other pictures, and they start making bigger notes and notebooks, and it expands out into the Returning Rapids Project, which is this enormous, very cool thing. So we're here to hear about the secret that the river was sharing and the secret that the river guides had and where it went and what it's doing. With that are my awesome guests, and they are all going to introduce themselves to you, and then we're going to dive into a bunch of conversation and questions. Isabel, would you start us off? Tell us who you are.
My name is Isabella Adler. I live in Moab, Utah, but I'm originally from the East Coast. I work as a river guide for oars out of Moab, and I've also been with the Returning Rapids Project for around 2 years now. My first river job was as a river ranger for Canyonlands National Park, which I loved, and I got to see some of the changes that were going on. And then after that, I realized that I wanted to be down in the rapids more, and that guiding was a really good fit for doing that. So I switched over to that.
Awesome.
My name's Davide Ippolito. I grew up in Dallas, but my family's all from Sicily. I am first generation here. And started guiding in 2021 with an interest of kind of trying to tackle some of the climate change stuff that freaked me out, and guiding kind of led me to, you know, conservation work and to the Returning Rapids Project, but been working with the team since 2022, and yeah.
My name is Mike DeHoff. I have lived most of my life in Utah and Colorado. I started working as a river guide in the early 1990s. I guided mostly on the Colorado River and its tributaries. I worked a little bit in the outdoor education industry also till the late 2000s. In the late 2000s, I needed a change, and I shuffled over to work as a ground shuttle and jet boat driver company that serviced the flatwater stretches of the Green and the Colorado River, ending at the confluence of the Green and the Colorado River down in the heart of Canyonlands National Park. Working in that job, I had to learn how to weld because we had so many aluminum canoes and jet boats that just somehow needed repair all the time. That turned into eddy line welding, which grew so much that I left doing the jet boat shuttle stuff to just run a welding company, trying to make cool river stuff that we would want to use for our own trips. People would come by the shop all the time, and 2 regular customers, Peter Lefebvre and Bego Gerhardt, came by, and we would end up talking about Cataract Canyon a lot. At the same time, my wife Meg and I would have to go out and test all the products that we made in the shop just to make sure it worked, and that was often in Cataract Canyon. And Meg is a librarian who would guide me to find all these old historic photos of Cataract Canyon, why all these changes were happening that we're going to get into. And it's a pleasure to be here, although sitting in front of you all is scarier than thinking about running the Rapids and Cataract at 30,000. Thank you for having us.
I was lucky enough to have an Eddyline welding frame, and it was my favorite frame. I did sell it, sadly, because I was selling the boat. If you ever come across someone selling an Eddyline frame, you should just buy it like some old cast iron skillet and treasure it. Maybe grease it up a little bit. Mike, would you tell us about where we're going to talk about? Geolocate us to the Colorado River, the San Juan River, Cataract Canyon, and Lake Powell. Please.
Sure. So because this is going to be for more than just the people in this room to geolocate, I would ask everybody to think about the Continental Divide. And the rivers that we study, that water originates along a lot of those places in the Continental Divide. Colorado River originates in northern Colorado and flows into Utah, where it meets the Green River. The Green River starts in Wyoming and flows south into Utah. And they come into the Colorado Plateau, which is sedimentary rocks, where they pick up a lot of sediment, and sediment's going to be a big character in our story. They meet in the heart of Canyonlands National Park, at what is known as the confluence, to really form the Colorado in its big, true, wild self. The stretch of river below where those two rivers come together is a 41-mile stretch known as Cataract Canyon. And then if you go back and think a little bit more about that Continental Divide again, from the southern part of Colorado, the San Juan River originates, and it flows in a zigzaggy fashion west to meet the Colorado in what was a very sacred confluence to a lot of the First Nation folks under the shadow of Navajo Mountain, just a little bit north of the Utah-Arizona border. Also in the shadow of Navajo Mountain, it was deemed a while ago that there should be a dam that's put in there. So Glen Canyon Dam was put in the Navajo sandstone of that area that backed the Colorado River up 186 miles, the San Juan about 80 miles, to form the nation's second largest reservoir of about 24 million some acre feet of reservoir water.
It's a lot of water.
Yeah.
It's a lot of water. So returning rapids. We're here to talk about returning rapids. Just tell us, what is a returning rapid?
Yeah.
And when did you all notice the first little returning rapid?
Sure. So to keep it super simple, a river flowing through a canyon where there are rapids, someone puts a dam in that canyon, inundates the side of that rapid so it goes away, it's flooded. Well, we've talked about sediment a little bit. Our rivers flowing across the Colorado Plateau landscape pick up a lot of that sediment, and it can carry it as long as that river is allowed to flow. But once you still it as it comes into a reservoir, that all settles out, and it covers the side of that rapid. Well, as you all know, Lake Powell is shrinking at a rapid rate. And when it shrinks and that side of that rapid is re-exposed, the river starts doing what it does, just carving things back. And it carves away the sediment and re-exposes that area where there was a rapid. And that rapid coming back is sort of the phenomenon that we call returning rapids.
And the first one, talk a little bit about the first one, the first noticing.
So different people in our team have different stories around that. For me, I think about how I was on this stretch in like early 2010s where we were starting to notice that Lake Powell was going down and staying down. And there was this foam pile about the size of our little bunch sitting right here that just came up that wasn't there 2 weeks ago. I was like, that's interesting. Look at that. This is a kayak surf dream because there's eddy surface all around because you can get into it easy, but this thing's coming back. And that would grow into what would be a really big rapid that these days flip boats at high water. And so that's kind of the beginning of just being out there enough to notice the observations, to notice the change in a place.
Question about sediment really quick. We'll get more into it, but just for context, you've told me before kind of the idea, the amount of sediment that comes down daily down the Colorado. I want to say a guesstimate. How much sediment do you understand is typically coming down the Colorado?
You can put it in a bunch of different ways. Some people say 7 Mississippi barge loads of mud pass a given point every day on the Colorado River main stem. Other people would say take a football field, cover it with a foot of dirt, and then stack that 40,000 times on top of each other. And that's how much sediment flows into the basin of that is Lake Powell Reservoir that's created by Glen Canyon Dam. It's a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
So after you all notice this, you're just kind of like in geek out mode, that good geek out mode. You're geeking out about this. You're taking pictures, sharing notes, talking about it. it becomes this other thing. What are you all doing in those first stages, maybe months, even a couple of years, as you observe, note take? What are you all doing with this thing?
Well, Bago and Pete would come by the welding shop. And of course, we'd have to stop to tell river stories over like making metal stick together. And it would be like, oh, what about this and this changed and that? And Pete works for oars on a regular, and so he would be in the shop between different trips. At the same time, Meg and I would be talking about things, and Meg would be trying to get work done, and I'd bug her, and she'd be like, here, go look at all these river photos over here on this archive. And so I'd go through, paw through all of it, find all these old photos of places that we thought were going to be returning, print them up, and then we'd all pick a date to go on a river trip, and we would jokingly say we'd go boating and we'd take pictures. We would go on the treasure hunt and trying to match this picture, be out in the canyon and be like, nope, not quite yet. It's not back yet. But we'd take pictures to be able to help to tell the story or for us to be able to understand it.
I think it's interesting, too, to talk about the age class, that Pete's a little younger than you. You're this middle-aged guy, and then Bago's got this just plethora of river running experience. And the three of you, the four of you, are able to really have this just mental reference of what the river has looked like over all these different years. Yeah.
So Bago worked for Martin Litton running dories down in the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
But he also says the first year that he started working as a raft guide was 1971, when one of the big stories, one of the big characters in our story, Gypsum Canyon Rapid, he saw it go away. And we've documented it come back. And Pete works for oars on the regular, and I believe he runs in the Grand Canyon for a couple of other companies too. He then would just have this amazing ability to take in observations as he's doing every trip. And then it's kind of like a joke, a welder, a river guide, a dory guy, and a librarian walk into a bar. But instead, we started carrying about a river stretch that everybody thought was forever ruined. And the results are very different, and things have grown so much. And Meg, our librarian of the team, would help me go look and find different things. Even in the days of Google, librarians are still incredibly necessary to be able to help you navigate all this different information. And so that's really a role that we'd have. And so it's like all those powers combined into one really can set you off on a great adventure.
And this gypsum rapid that you talked about, that Bago watched go away, went away, slowly came back. I think you just swam out of it last week or something in a big 18-foot boat. Sure did. It's back and it's
got
fierce.
teeth.
Yeah. So the organization, Returning Rapids, this concept, this meeting at the welding shop, grows and becomes things. Isabel, would you tell us what it is now and what it is that you all are doing? I mean, you're employed. You have a job here. Tell us what's going on now.
I think that fundamental characteristic of it's just a group of people who are insanely passionate and obsessed about this one area is still really true. But it's definitely grown in scale a lot since I've come on and over the time it's been going on. But now it's like this huge collective of people who are passionate about different areas of the story that's unfolding in these areas. So we have people who are studying sediment, people who are writing about the stories that are happening, and we get to go and facilitate these experiences and take people down into these stretches of river like the San Juan and like the Colorado that are generally pretty hard to access, and get to go down with groups of people to just talk about what's going on, document what's going on, and kind of share the story and witness about the changes that are happening.
And because of the nature of where the main takeout, North Wash, which is mostly inaccessible now because it's on a sediment bank, but because of its proximity to the lake, to the river, this has been a place where you all will take out a river trips, but you'll also put motorboats in, not ski boats, skiffs with removable motors, and hump them down, hump them back up, and go upriver, downriver, row these boats. I mean, I've been with you where we've motored and rowed these little cool science boats. So in this room, there's all of you. Salt Lake City happens to be home of some of the scientists who get to work with you all. And we're going to ask that question, but there are some cool scientists in the room, USGS, from the universities, that have come out today to listen to this. Davide, talk to us about who the people are that now are kind of inside and surrounding the Returning Rapids project.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who are involved in the project in general, but we kind of have a core team. It's maybe 4 or 5 of us who are kind of keeping that rhythm going. There's a few of us on stage and then a couple people in the crowd, and then we have a couple other guides/researchers. It's hard to put a label on what our role is because it's a lot of different things. So do we call ourselves guides? Do we call ourselves researchers? Do we call ourselves facilitators? It's interesting, and it keeps it fun. Outside of that, we have so many advocates and supportive people who are doing things from kind of giving us bona fide research and results that we can show. That's like a lot of our science partners with the University of Utah, or like Utah Water Science Program and USGS. And so our team of scientists who work with us, they give us a lot of legitimacy. They help focus maybe our attention on some things that are unique about our study area. And then aside from, just hard science, we have a lot of people who are like reporters who are coming out interested in helping tell our story. We've had a lot of, First Nation tribe members come and, help us, see different sides of the places that we're looking at. It's kind of a whole mesh of people, and I think it kind of comes back to this is something that our community is interested in, and the community is kind of like focused in. And I'd say one of the cooler parts about the project is how many different people from different walks of life like actually are involved in it.
Mm-hmm. I've been lucky enough to be at when Eddyline, Mike has since moved on from Eddyline, but when it was still there, it was always a fun place to go. And for sure, you'd be measuring out a frame, and then someone would show up with this information about this to talk about returning rapids and bring in more pieces. Mike, talk to us about how the researchers, the scientists, these doctors of river science and earth science and other pieces of the game, how you got to know them, get familiar with them, why they wanted to be involved, why you wanted them involved. What's that story?
So I would credit Mike Feebig with American Rivers. He and his wife Jenny were doing a source to sea trip down the Green to the Colorado and further down in 2018. And you were on that cataract trip that we joined them. And on that, there was a person who worked with the University of Utah, and they suggested that we should get a bunch of faculty members from the University of Utah and go to a trip. And on that trip, we had these incredibly smart, educated people, experts in their field, who just said, I cannot believe what I'm seeing down here. Things are changing right before my eyes. I've studied this my whole life. I have study sites all around the world, and this is the one thing that I want to study. This is one of the most interesting things I've ever seen, and it's in my backyard, and it's happening down here. And at the same time, we were also trying to engage Park Service folks or other scientists, like, why isn't anybody studying this? And people are like, we don't know. People just maybe spend a little bit of time or don't understand the whole concept. And that's really where the observation of people who frequently run that canyon often is like, no, this is changing at an alarming rate. And then once we start showing people how much that rate is changing, then they come in with a lot of their curious minds. And for us, I don't claim to be a smart person about stuff. And they were like, oh no, if we need to determine rates of change, we need to do this and this. And these are all the different cool toys that we can go take little snippets of what's happening right now and then repeat that a year later, and then we can determine rates of change. And we could discover how fast is the river pushing out that sediment. So how fast is a rapid coming back? And then all these other things that fell into it. Because one thing that really sticks with me so much is everybody is curious about what's going to happen with the Colorado River system. What is the future of this great resource? And the more people could come in to study it, the better. When we would take the caveat of like, look, we just want to be able to boil it down into a simple way to communicate it to everybody. And so you can see and you can understand how the Colorado River is changing in Cataract Canyon.
I'm going to interject a question for you. Let's get a little bit more into the sediment, because I think it's easy to picture Utah and all the beautiful red rocks and the canyons, and we think of them as hard. Like if you fell on them, they would hurt. But the sediment that you're talking about that's been deposited is really very soft. and it moves quickly with water. Just give a bit more clarity on what it looks like in there for like the audio mind, the non-picture mind right here, the audio mind, what it looks like in there with these sediment cliffs and what you all have named it.
Oh, okay. I'll get into that. Let's start by going to Boulder Dam first. So,
which is where?
Boulder Dam is down by Las Vegas, and also people know about Hoover Dam. Yeah. So, to make the first largest reservoir in the United States and to do some flood control for Colorado, Hoover Dam was put in. And in a study, they determined that there was this really fast rate of sedimentation. These rivers flowing across sedimentary rocks, which is what the Colorado Plateau is, would pick up and carry so much sediment. And it was carrying so much sediment into Lake Mead that it made reservoir and water managers worried because the water storage was getting displaced by sediment. So while it was not explicitly disclosed, it was determined to put another dam in to protect that reservoir, Lake Mead, and that was Glen Canyon Dam. In Glen Canyon Dam, when you have waterways that are long and very sinuous, you can trap sediment really far away from the dam, and that was the aim of it. And so in a weird way, Lake Powell is the world's most beautiful settling pond. But what I firmly believe is this sediment is the byproduct of how we mine water from the Colorado River system. And so that sediment, there's so much of it that comes in, and it stacks up to the point, like at the site of Gypsum Canyon Rapid, that sediment bank was 110 feet tall. And when it first got exposed, when the reservoir first dropped out, the river had to carve down through that. And we watched it carve through that. I mean, watching Gypsum Canyon Rapid come back took 6 years to watch the river carve the whole way down through that. These sediment banks are so huge that we have documented a sediment slump of 1.3 million cubic meters that moved in one event, which is like a Costco sliding across the street to order a burger at McDonald's across the way. I mean, it's fascinating. It's so much stuff happening. And we call it after the person who said, oh, we don't need to worry about sedimentation. It'll take hundreds of years before that is going to cause any major impacts. And that person was the commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation when that was formed. And that person's name is Floyd Dominy. And so we were down there with some USGS scientists, and they were like, what do you guys call this stuff? We're like, oh, we just call it the Lake Powell Formation. And they were like, no, you cannot do that. I was like, why? We're like, first off, John Wesley Powell would not want this reservoir named after him. And secondly, he wouldn't want this byproduct named after him, and it's a disservice to him. And I was like, so fine, who is the person who was in charge of all this? And they're like, well, Floyd Dominy really championed this. And we're like, fine, it's the Dominy Formation. And just like that stuff sticks to your shoes and to other parts of your body, the Dominy Formation name has stuck, and it is there, and we regularly call it the Dominy Formation.
So tell us a little bit more about some of the trips you're doing. I've been able to go with you just as a friend many times, and it always becomes a little bit of a returning rapids trip because we're just talking about these things that are moving. But there's a science trip you do in the fall that is this collection. I mean, you want to talk about a trip leader? I'm going to give you a little shout out here. This guy is like trip leader master. He'll bring down journalists and scientists and all these other people, and it's like the most smoothly operated situation. Tell us about a science trip, what you're doing. Just give the crowd that idea of the level of engagement that is being organized by Returning Rapids to capture the information.
So it depends a little bit on what our data collection goals are. And some trips are very much like what I call the sampler platter, where you do have all the different things, and other are like really geared towards certain data collection. So for example, in this spring, April, we all did a resurvey of the San Juan River that hadn't been done since 1921. And we are surveying water surface elevation, riverbed elevation, and then the top of this new sediment elevation. And what that takes is you have to figure out what type of boats you're going to be able to get through this whole area. So we kind of like go buy all these old beat up grandpa fishing boats and put some stuff on them so that you could both row them and run motors on them. We have to leapfrog all these different super fancy GPSs that give you X, Y, and Z locations within like centimeters on the landscape. We have to have sometimes a rim team of people who do the same thing so that these super fancy things can communicate. And then we also have to do all the other things you do on a river trip usually. And then you got to have fun. So we got to do that a little bit too as we're going along. But the trips are just different based on what the initiative is. So for this coming year, we're going to do some Lower San Juan trips where we're going to go study. There's so much sediment load on the San Juan that there isn't returning rapids. But there's this amazing returning ecosystem that wherever the rivers are allowed to flow, it's fascinating how much life is brought back with it. Whereas you get to the reservoir and it rises and falls and it just scours the landscape of life. In a national park unit, by the way. So we're going to do that. We're working with one of our partners. Audubon wants to do a bird survey. The partner that we work with there says, birds are one of the first responders of ecological recovery, and we should go survey and see what the population is down there. So we're trying to raise money to do that. And then partnering with ORS, we're actually going to try to do a policy and decision maker trip in September, where we're sending out invites to a lot of NGO folks, a lot of key elected official decision makers, and then of course you got to bring along tribal folks, scientists, and the journalists to be able to like round out how do we collectively go all look at this. And it's one of these things where like we get people down there, we hardly have to do anything because the river speaks for itself so much.
So another piece I want to add in here is that Lake Powell, if you've been there, you have an idea of it. If you haven't, it's just this enormous catchment of water. These guys usually call it Reservoir Powell. I'm surprised it hasn't come out so prominently yet. But Reservoir Powell, Lake Powell is this enormous place with all these side canyons coming in. And I was actually able to go out a few years ago at Davide and the Glen Canyon Institute, where we motored across and then start to slowly motor up into these canyons and see where the lake has dropped and these canyon places are coming back. And it's just incredible. I highly encourage you all to take advantage of this and go see these magic places. Mike, one last question for you. Quick summary of what happens with returning rapids off the river. What are you doing when you're not in skiffs, rowing boats, talking with these people in the sand, in the water? What are you doing when you're in front of a computer? And what are the other people at Returning Rapids doing? Like, what does off the water in the building look like?
So I'm going to do one serious answer and a couple funny answers if I can. The funny answers first would be like, well, how many people does it take to fix the Northwest boat ramp? Another one would be like, how many people does it take to try to figure out how we could save Cataract Canyon? But then the behind the scenes part of that is sitting down and going through photos and matching them and putting them together. One of the things I just did to try to help the geotechnical survey people for the Northwest boat ramp was go through all the photos we had of that area, both prehistory, things that we've taken in our photo archive, and then modern day, what we're seeing right now, and match them in such a way that can illustrate the story of what the landscape underneath all the sediment as it goes by the Northwest boat ramp look like. And that's just, it's a simple way to communicate with people about what was and what is and what choices we need to make about things. And so engaging with people about that on all different levels and planning for, okay, this trip's next, we got to get this information, we got to get our trip report out from our October science survey trip. We're putting together and working on different ways, like we've got scroll maps rolled out here that Isabel does, that's just such a great visual aid to show sediment, landscape, where the river is, what the reservoir level is. And so the thing that I talked about earlier about how we jokingly say we go boating and take pictures, we have learned that there's a different, bigger charge, and that is to tell the story of the changes that we're seeing. And so the front country stuff is really telling the story of the things we're seeing. And it is amazing how much the public appetite really wants to be able to look at that and digest it.
So we're here to explore returning rapids, but also explore how river guides become, how you all were river guides, are river guides, and created this thing, and how river guides just know so much about rivers. I think by the time when I was river guiding, and I still have some of my favorite places on the Dolores River, there's an eddy that I just will always stop at and just park and hang out, have lunch, have a nap. There's a walk over here. There's just these special places that we all know as river guides and our relationships. Talk to us, all of you, about what river guides are really bringing to this outfit. What's the depth of it? There's the river navigation, there's the ability to live outside, there's the ability to take care of people, but what is the inherent thing that river guides are bringing to the Returning Rapids project?
Yeah, I think aside from those technical skills that you just talked about, just a love of adventure and a love of uncertainty. I mean, we get to go down these stretches of river that are changing all the time. You never know when you're going to round a corner and there's going to be a new mud rapid. Or on the lowest San Juan, we're portaging boats around waterfalls, these metal skiffs. And it's this excitement for being in these ridiculous situations sometimes. And it's a love of that uncertainty, that feeling of adventure.
Yeah, I agree. It's just like kind of leaning into those maybe challenges that are weird and wacky. I think there's this passion that guides can bring to these places, and they share these stories that they have. They bring people down, and I'm a firm believer in, like, you know, the butterfly effect. You never know how far a ripple is going to go. And I think as far as like guides and people who are, you know, stewards of these places, they tell the story. They're there week after week. I mean, it's kind of funny going to Woody's and, like, I feel like you're talking with someone at the bar and you're always talking about boating and you're always talking about Cataract Canyon. And it's like you hear another conversation and it's like, oh, there's a bunch of cat guides who are talking about Cataract Canyon right now. And it's like, what, don't they get tired of talking about these places? And I think the stories, you know, they're really powerful. And I think that's what a lot of, you know, not just our team, but like the community around Moab, you know, is doing. Yeah, it's obsessive almost, but you just fall in love with a place and all you want to do is talk about it, and all you want to do is be down there. And I'll freeze my butt off in the winter down there. I'll go in the scorching summer and spend time in this place. And I feel like I am not unique in that, you know, way. There's a lot of guides who are just, I'll be down there anytime I can.
For me, I think, you know, we're talking about multi-day trips, but I also know that a lot of the folks here just run daily trips. And I think about, your question makes me think about, I worked for a little bit on this river in Australia called the Tully River, and it's up in Cairns in the World Heritage Rainforest. And one day, it's one of those stretches you do like 4 times a day. Beautiful stretch. Go run that river if you can, it's beautiful. But one day we saw this python eating this pig. And so, of course, as a river guide, you're like, check it out, this is so cool. Because some of the people might not see it, they're looking around at other things. But then the python crawled up into like this little niche in these rocks. And of course, the next day as you're going by 4 times, you're like, hey everybody, check out the python that's digesting this pig up here. And I think that's really what river guides do, is we interpret the landscape for a lot of folks. We make sure they see cool things that we have the intimate knowledge to be able to understand and point it out to people, so it enriches their experience and also their understanding of things. And it's cool to watch a pig get digested over time.
So there are these things, and later after the show, please come up, check out these scroll maps. They're just incredible. It's an old style of map that's been redigitized and made into a modern piece, and really beautiful. And there's these binders that just every year an annual edition comes out and has a bunch of information about this project. Davide, talk about the relationship. You're still very much guiding,
Yeah.
commercial guiding as well as working with Returning Rapids. Talk about the relationship that has been going on, and still is happening, between Returning Rapids and the outfitters on the Colorado Plateau, really on the Colorado River, the outfitters and the guides. What's that relationship? What's the purpose? How is that? How is the feeling of that, the relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this back and forth exchange of information that's happening, and we try and, you know, give as many guides or guide types or outfitters in the Moab community information when there's things coming up like a new mud rapid, or, you know, the delta crossing the boundary from the river to the lake can be really challenging, and it changes week after week. And so there's this back and forth communication, real-time feed of like, what's happening down there right now? I'd almost expand that to like the Park Service and even the few brave private boaters who make the journey down Cataract Canyon. There's this Returning Rapids, I see it almost as a nexus where we're able to, you know, hear information from maybe a park ranger and someone at Sherry Griffith who came and they're like, hey, you guys are always doing work down there and you're actually writing stuff about this. You should know that there's a messed up rapid that formed and, I pinned my boat in it and it, could get worse. Things like that actually do happen. I mean, I've been on 2 trips in the last 2 years where I got a text message from someone ahead of me on the river saying that there's a new rapid, PFD is back on, and you should scout this thing. And so I think there's this sharing of information, and there's also we're in this tough spot with North Wash Boat Ramp, and there is a lot of communication that's going to people who are making decisions on how do we resolve the issues surrounding this boat ramp. And I guess to put it in a nutshell, we're sharing information and we're kind of this nexus point where people can share that information. And the field binders are a great resource. I know that a lot of guides love pulling these out towards the end of their trips. It's a section of river that used to have rapids, but now it doesn't. So it's a little bit more relaxed pace down below gypsum. And you have this opportunity with a field binder to sit there with your guest in flat water and match photos with them in real time. And people are obsessed with these things. A lot of trips, I'll be sharing my own personal field binder and I'll get asked how do I purchase one of these things? How can I do this? So I know it's a resource for guides as well.
And there was a time when that last 30 miles from kind of below Big Drop 3 before gypsum was out down to North Wash that the customers, the motorboat, the rafts would just bind up, throw on a motor and go. And it was just this weird, what just happened to the river? It looks weird in here. Let's go. Let's get out of here. Now it's a different scene, and you're able to, provide these binders, and you're filling in a void. I think, if I'm right about this, that the typical map does not have this stuff is not laid out anywhere. You are providing the map at this point in the game.
And it's crazy to think, it occurred to me while we were putting this year's field binder together, there's no reservoir water in Cataract Canyon anymore.
Whoa.
It's all been displaced by sediment.
Yeah.
And the river's working on that. But that is a huge measure of change.
Would that be Domini?
What's that?
Sediment, you mean Domini?
Yeah, the Domini is getting pushed out.
Yes. So if you think back to when we started this story, we were talking about the micro thing, the micro change these guys saw, this little maybe foam pile, riffle stick out, 3 different stories of it, and how it has become this organization. At this point, the Returning Rapids has been featured in a lot of media. Here's a somewhat complete list. The River Radius podcast. Yes. We've done a few different episodes to include this one. The Moab Sun, the Salt Lake Tribune, the American Rivers blog, the Outward Bound blog, Riders on the Range, Smithsonian Magazine, the New York Times, KUNC, Natural Resources Journal, the Washington Post, Sierra Magazine, Vice News, the New Yorker, NPR, and All Things Considered, the Mountain Prairie podcast, several conferences, symposiums, guide presentations, and now a film that I was just told won the best international short documentary at a climate change film festival in London. And Mike was showing me on his phone this wraparound screen in some square. What's
Piccadilly Circus.
Piccadilly Circus.
Yes. Yeah, it's like Times Square.
And on this huge screen in this Piccadilly Circus is a clip from their film. So from the bottom of this canyon here in Utah to London, the media range of this project is huge. Talk about that relationship. I know you're telling us that you're here to, part of what you're doing is telling the stories. Just expand on that, why, how that's developed, the fun it's been, the curiosity it's been.
Well, I think all that press just shows the general public curiosity about things. And why, for me, I would always be happier taking the Everett Roos approach to just go out in the wild landscape and enjoy the beauty of it and everything. I think that's not solely the way that we should approach everything. Like I said, it's back to how do we tell the story of what we're seeing? And I just gave a presentation to a Sierra Club group and got an email from someone who's like, I can't come be on the Colorado River, but the work you all are doing helped me to understand that. And the press is just an example of all the different questions of the general public curiosity. And I find it as a duty for us to engage them and talk about everything we're seeing, because who knows what's going to happen with the Colorado River system going forward. And people should be informed about it. And one of the things that we're very lucky to do is we're able to say, hey, look, everybody, the river can restore everything at this astounding rate. And you need to know that as we go into decisions, because a lot of the decision makers who are having control over these huge decisions around the river, they're not really out there all the time seeing it. They're looking at maps and spreadsheets and crunching how many acre feet there are, while we're out there watching cubic feet per second flow down and carve rapids back. And that difference for me is important because people gotta know what the river can do. And I'm a big believer that it's such a good resource, but we also gotta be thinking about how can we have it and help it be as healthy as possible in any place we can, and like, still have that. And that's, I think, a lot of what the press wants to try to figure out.
Isabel, I want to ask you about what your perspective on the impact of returning rapids is, what this project is. We're hearing it. We're hearing about the media, the science, but tell us a bit more, and I mean from your perspective. You told me yesterday that you grew up in New York City, different place than rural Utah, the depths of these parks, maybe similar in the heights of some of the structures around you, but coming from that place, coming from your perspective, what's been and is the ongoing impact of the Returning Rapids project?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, the communications side of it, which Mike was just touching on, really stands out because I grew up in a city and knew nothing about running rivers, but I think I saw the film Damnation at some point in college and was just like absolutely struck by it and kind of became obsessed with the thought of being on rivers after that. And so I feel like my own life experience has shown how powerful these narratives can be about these places. I feel like I almost changed the trajectory of my whole life now to be out here and studying and documenting what's going on. And so to see the impact now, to see that this story is echoing, it's resonating with so many people is incredible. And I think something we talk about a lot is that what's happening on the Colorado River and the San Juan River is really a story of hope in the face of climate change, in the face of so many narratives about climate doom and environmental issues that just feel so big and heavy to tackle. And then we have this story going on that's unfolding without really any human intervention of these places recovering, of species coming back and thriving. And we get to go and witness it, and we get to document it and try and show it to other people so that they can also bear witness to it too. But I think the impact that really stands out the most to me is how positive this story really feels.
I might be assuming here, but I think these guys are older than you. I'm curious about when you talk with your friends. Clearly assuming. But when you talk with your friends, wherever your friends are, in Moab, in that region, in other places back in New York, and you tell them about the work you're doing, does that idea, this hope in the face of climate change, do they feel it? How do they respond to it? What is that conversation going on? Yeah,
totally. I mean, the hope and also just like the beauty of it too. I mean, really resonates with people. But yeah, I think it's so nice to have a story to hold on to that is positive. That is, the reservoir is shrinking and that's scary. But at the same time, we have these places coming back. And it doesn't really matter if you've been here or not, or if you have spent time on rivers or not. That narrative of ecological recovery resonates with people no matter where they are, because there are environmental issues everywhere. And being able to find those stories of hope and positive change, I think bring everyone up, keeps energizing the movement.
So this room's full of outfitters, river guides, all kinds of folks doing things with river outfitting and with other outfitting as well, all these different layers of the picture. And there's a lot of outfitters that are running day trips, and day trips exclusively, or short overnight trips, even long overnight trips. And the pressure on the river guides to do their job is intense, to have all the right gear, to have all the right training, to be fed and to be hydrated for the day, to be ready for the day, to get the boats ready, to count people, all day and keep the right count of what people are where, get them back in the boat, and all these details. And there's a lot of outfitters that are going to go home to these places where they just smash out busloads of people and stacks of boats on trailers. Not all of these river guides. I mean, that's not the story. Is not here for these river guides to go home and find their favorite rock and their favorite eddy and create a research project that becomes this thing. So what do you feel like is a story, a message? The message, I feel like that's canned answer, but what's the vibe you want to send back to enmesh with outfitters and guides for them to go home with for this season, for their career, for even just a trip, in terms of thinking about the rivers they love, the places they love, the planet we all live on, the fun and joy of river running, the coolness of observing and learning your rivers? What are y'all thinking about when you think about that? I think, Mike, you might have been ready to lead that. Are you still ready to lead that?
So, I think that people are often drawn to going on whatever kind of guided experience for one thing and walk away with so much more. In a way, it's not exactly a well-intentioned bait and switch, but it's like an expansion of people's perspective. That, I'm going to go run this big Class 5 rapid. But yet they might remember like, but when we got done with the trip that day, we saw the most beautiful sunset. Or, hey, we got to see a python digesting a pig. I never thought I'd see that in the middle of a Class 4 rapid. Stuff like that I think like there are little moments that will stay with people that you don't even understand sometimes as a river guide. But what we can do is just take people there, help them have the best experience they can, and let them walk away with whatever good memories are going to keep them going forth in their life about things. And that's, I think, a very important thing about getting people to the outdoors these days.
I think about, everyone knows that old crusty guide who's never happy and, I never want to get there. And what do I do? What do I do to avoid that is kind of where I'm thinking. I'm like, I would make sure that I take time to do the things I need to do to keep that passion for a place. For me, it's a lot of like spending time not in a work capacity in these areas, if I'm able to afford that, or even when I'm in those places at work, taking it a little bit slower sometimes and appreciating those moments that remind me why I'm in this industry. And, on the other end, if it's like communicating to guides, like what can you do? What's the takeaway from this? Like anyone can make observations. You don't need to be a scientist. You don't need to have credentials to look at things, see them changing, tell the story. And whether that's a photo or you're just the biggest mouth in the room and you're telling a story that way, that's cool. And that's a way that you can spread love for the places that you're guiding. But yeah, try and avoid that burnout is pretty important, for keeping, that love for the place, like showing through when you're speaking.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like feeding your little obsessions with the rivers that you run, which we all do, but we all have our little things that we're so obsessed with. And I think that's a really big part of the work that we do is just like being curious and following that curiosity. And I think Mike touched on this too, but just to underscore it, like facilitating people having emotional connections to these landscapes is so essential for protecting these landscapes and for inspiring people to protect their home landscapes too. It's so impactful to have someone have a good time or have a really core memory formed on a trip with you. And I think that, it's the butterfly effect. It can expand way more than I think any of us can realize, even if we aren't even talking about conservation issues on the river. It's just people loving a place is so important.
There was that person we had in September who just survived I think, very intense breast cancer round.
Yeah.
And she was like, I left my heart in Cataract Canyon a long time ago. And I think about it all the time. And it's what got me through all this stuff. And now I get to come back and see it again.
Yeah, after like 20 years, she came back and remembered
so cool.
a lot of it. It was really cool.
She sent me an article she wrote for the Cincinnati paper. So.
So we're going to do 3 more questions. And then we're going to have a Q&A from you all. There'll be some mics running around. So please get your questions ready. We want to hear from you. These guys want to answer your questions. They're for them, not me. And but the next 3 questions are a new piece I'm adding in. In the last couple episodes, I've been doing this, but it's kind of just a new trend for the River Radius. when I started the podcast, and when I say new trend, there are 3 questions I'm asking of each guest in each episode. When I started the River Radius, there was a few reasons, but the key question I wanted to ask was, what is a river? And it's because I had this feeling of when I sat next to a river, I think I would just get dumbfounded. Like, how does this work? Why is the water right here? And how does it keep coming? And what happens if I put a wall here? What happens to, I just had so many questions. And I've been able to have some really amazing scientists come on and explain what a river is. But now I'm asking that question of each guest. What is a river? And then I'm asking 2 other questions, but those will come next. So who's going to ask? Davide. Davide, you are the master of this question.
Yeah.
Davide, what is a river?
Hard to lump it up in like a minute or so, but I mean, in its most basic form, it's, material that flows, right? But I think of a river as this living thing. You can watch it, and there's so many analogies that you can find with your life in a river. And it's got this cycle, the water cycle that we know about, but it's also got moments where it's fast and furious and moments where it's calm, and it's this visual, visceral, representation of what a living thing is, to me at least. And you can travel on it too, which is pretty cool. But, in some ways I think you could get philosophical and say any living thing that's moving through the universe is a river of sorts. But we get to look at water flowing, and it's like an easy way for my brain to kind of bridge that idea, if that makes sense.
I'll keep thinking if it makes sense. All right, then, Isabel, you're next. So the next question is from a previous guest. They didn't know who they were asking the question to, but I asked the last guest I interviewed just last week, what's a question you want to send forward? And so the last guest is Julie Munger, and she's one of 3 women who riverboarded the Colorado River through the entirety of the Grand Canyon from Glen Canyon Dam all the way out to Pierce Ferry takeout ramp, whatever that is, 300-ish miles. I don't know if you've seen this film. It's actually coming out again soon. They did this in 2001. That's a whole other wild story. In the winter, riverboarded that whole, they're swimming the whole thing. Okay, back to returning rapids. That was a really fun interview. The question, Isabel, is to you. They didn't know it was to you, but it is. And it says, what is the most important lesson or thing the river has taught you? What is the most important lesson or thing the river has taught you?
My answer is so cheesy, but go with the flow. I feel like learning how to row, one of the many lessons that stood out to me was you can't really fight the current always. You need to work with what you have, where you find yourself. You can pick your line, but you need to also have plan B and plan C sometimes. And so it's, understanding that in life too, you need to understand where you are, where your momentum is, and how to use that to continue on the course you're on or change course, but to work with what you have, and you can't control everything.
Mm-hmm. And Mike, for you, what's a question for a future guest of the River Radius?
I would say, in the complications of everything you do, what is it that makes you the happiest?
You can all think of that too. So at this point, we're going to move into questions and answers. We'll come back up here and do a final see you later, thank you, all those kinds of fun things. There's 2 fellows here, Stephen Foy, as you know, it's Foy, and Mike Fiebig. You guys got the mics? You got them. Okay, they're going to run around and give you a mic. What I want you to do is please say your name, stand up, wait for the mic, stand up, tell us your name and your location, but by river, and then ask your question. And it's really hard to see. I think there's a hand in the middle. Where are you at, Fiebig?
He's over there.
Oh, hi. How's it going? All right. So microphone, right? Did you? Yeah, right there in the middle. That dude has a hand up. And the rest of you get your questions. Here we go.
Thanks. Everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So my name is Jason. My location on the Colorado River is at the confluence of the Gunnison and the Colorado River. Woo! So Grand Junction.
Yeah.
My question is, there's all these studies on the returning rapids, and the sediment's been a big discussion, big topic of this. Is there any science or research being done on where the sediment is going and what might happen as it comes up against the giant wall of Glen Canyon Dam?
So, yes, we are doing a lot of studies around that. I remember one time it occurred to me, like, okay, all the sediment is being evacuated out of Cataract Canyon, but where is it going? What is it doing? And what are the impacts it's going to cause when it lands there? And so in partnering with Kerry Johnson from University of Utah, working with some of the various USGS arms, we've been doing in-depth surveys of stuff on Lake Powell to try to determine that. Because I, these days, spend a lot of time thinking what's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, because I look back of the 30 years I've been having my friendship with the Colorado River system. I want to think about what's going to happen in the future. And so we've gone out. We had this guy show up from the Pacific Northwest, and we had our grandpa's fishing boats. He's like, I got $800,000 worth of equipment. We're going to put on those 2 boats. We're going to go spend a week out there hunting around, looking underwater, trying to figure out where all this sediment stuff is going. And it's fascinating, and it's a story that's still unfolding. On the San Juan River, there's so much superfine sediment that stays suspended that there's like this 2-meter thick flowing layer of goo that flows along the bottom of the reservoir to the confluence of the San Juan and Colorado and turns a corner and heads towards the dam. What's that going to do? And then we also have been determining like rates of remobilization when we see these giant million cubic meters of sediment slumps. We try to study like, well, what's causing those, and how do we help inform Park Service staffers so they can inform other visitors and so they could be safe in the face of this? Like, that is still an unfolding story. And Isabel does this great work on the scroll maps trying to illustrate where the sediment is and where it's going, and we're working on updating these. So with the sediment, it's stay tuned, but one of the big things I would just highlight real quick is no government agency takes responsibility for the sediment. And it is probably one of the biggest byproducts generated by anything in the state of Utah that's being dumped on lands that people are saying they're charged to protect. I just can't square that sometimes. And so stay tuned on that too.
A piece I'll add to that answer too is that there's on the other side of the dam, down in the Grand Canyon, they do the, what's the flow? The
High flow.
Yeah, the high flow experiments where they are releasing extra water to move and mobilize the sand down there, but there's no new deposition of sand of sediment from up in the basin. So they're kind of running out of it down there. That's a whole different kind of story, and I'm not an expert by any means. So let's move on to the next question so we can go there. Where are we at?
Hey there. Thanks so much for this discussion. It's amazing to hear about your project. My name is Sam Drivo. I live on the Clackamas River in Oregon. And in 2010, I was able to produce a documentary, a short video, thanks to American Whitewater and the Hydropower Reform Coalition, about the removal of the Trout Creek dam on Trout Creek. What's called Hemlock Dam. Very quickly in succession, there was a big dam that came out on the Hood River called River Mill Dam, and then there was Condit Dam on the White Salmon, and then the Elwha dams, which I wrote a big paper about in college, then clearly recently the Klamath dams. I was curious if you guys have taken the Returning Rapids project to learn anything about the Klamath dams currently, or if there are any other rivers. I know you're going to different rivers and using some of this advanced science. I was wondering if you've applied it to any of the dam removals that have occurred.
Not yet. Not that I can think of, at least, but it's definitely in our conversations. I know that we talk about it a lot, but I don't know. Do you know of any?
So I would just say that ours is a model of we're just normal people who noticed something and started talking about it. And I would encourage and empower anybody else to be able to take and do the same thing on your home stretch of river and everything. Our little like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride is so much that we're pretty engaged in where we are right now. And I do think that the conversation around how we manage our water resources is rapidly changing. And I think everybody should be involved in that conversation. And I think the next 10 years are going to be very interesting, not only in the Colorado River system, but in some of those other things that you were talking about. Good question.
Yeah.
can't see the mics at all. Where are we at? There we.
Yeah, my name is Bill Dvorak, and I operate primarily on the Arkansas and Colorado, but on several other rivers as well. And one of the concerns that I've got just listening to you is you kind of present climate change as a positive thing. And while it might be positive, you know, on those side canyons that flow into the Colorado River, for every one of these positive things, there's probably 1,000 things that aren't positive about climate change. And it just concerns me that we're presenting climate change in a positive way when, to me, it's everything but.
Yeah, I think that's certainly not our intention to make it seem like climate change is a positive thing. I think that, you know, we're all people who care a lot about the environment and spend a lot of time reading about the environment and reading the news and feeling that sense of kind of doom and gloom about climate change. And sometimes it's definitely overwhelming to read those narratives, and it feels almost disempowering sometimes when it feels like it's so hard to find wins in the climate change movement and addressing those issues. And so I think it's not so much like celebrating this byproduct of climate change, because climate change is a really difficult and terrible issue, but it's more finding this one kernel of something that's going on that gives us some hope, hope for, you know, that it can be an example for future climate change intervention, just seeing how these places can recover, you know, in the face of such policy upheaval and kind of the lack of climate intervention. It's more seeing that like these places can recover even if it kind of feels like sometimes we're not actually doing anything to help them at all. But no, we take climate change really seriously and are not at all celebrating that it's happening.
I notice a lot in the space where I'm working commercially with a lot of young guides in their like early 20s as well. Imagine being born 20 years ago and your whole life has just been a bombardment of negativity. And there's a reaction that I've seen before that I hate seeing in young people, that's just apathy.
Yeah.
And, you know, basically saying like, yeah, there's nothing we can do. It's all messed up beyond a point of return. And I think, yeah, to Isabel's point, this is I think a potential model for like, hey, you know, it doesn't take billions of dollars and tons of stuff to like have recovery happen, especially in an environment that like the Colorado River is in its history a boom bust river system. It's not, there's been times in the last, you know, few centuries where it's almost run dry. There's been times where it's, you know, running enormous, and that's its cycle. And so I think this speaks to more of a, hey, you know, Mother Nature is really powerful and can recover these places if we just give her the space to do it. But there is definitely this side where it's like, yeah, like I don't want to be like, hoorah, biggest drought in the last 1,200 years in the Southwest. I'm definitely not in that page, but it is relieving, I think, to a lot of people to have some kernels of positivity.
We do a lot of public presentations, and one thing I noticed that I never thought the whole like when's the next rapid going to come back would turn to this, and that is so many young people come up and say like, thank you so much, you're giving me hope in the face of climate change. And that's a vehicle, because I agree with you 100%. And I would think of it like this, is that, so one of my other jobs is I'm a landlord for a commercial building in Moab, and when it snows, I have to get up early and go shovel the whole parking lot, which sometimes can be so daunting. And sometimes when I'm shoveling the parking lot, the sun will come out and I'll look over my shoulder, and what I did in 5 minutes, or what I did in like an hour and a half, the sun just did in 5 minutes. And so I think we're asking people to think that if we make small changes, like maybe not having a reservoir in this area, to be aware that there are natural forces that can recover at this astounding rate, at a rate that even some of the best educated minds that we work with are like, I can't believe it. And if we can use that to think about how we change our ways on a much bigger scale, because like as much as the Colorado River is massive, it's also very small in the face of the whole climate change thing. And if that's a vehicle to get us to start thinking about it in a different way, why the hell not?
Are there more mics out there? More questions? Where you at? Foy, are you ready?
If there's another hand up.
Oh, okay, I see.
I've got another statement here, but I want to prioritize another question if there's one.
Okay, let's wrap it up with this one back here. Thank you.
Am I on?
Yes.
My name is JC. I'm down in Cataract with these guys. I have a question for you, Davide. You've been rowing gypsum since it was a riffle. Now that it has its teeth. So how was that swim through it a couple weeks ago?
Well, I'll start by saying that every rapid in Cataract Canyon, no matter how many times you've been down there, demands your full attention and respect. It's a wild ride. The first time I went down gypsum, it was like we were packaged up, PFDs were off, we were motoring, and it was like a couple little riffles over there, a bubble there, and la-di-da, like on to the next thing. And now, like a couple of years ago, we were like, dang, this thing's kind of big. I remember Ernie, one of people who encouraged me to start guiding, he was driving a motor package, and it just, I mean, nobody had PFDs on because gypsum rapid wasn't a thing. But then we went over what I think I swam a couple of weeks ago, and I look back at Ernie, he's like, well, maybe we shouldn't be motoring through this anymore. And, you know, as of a few weeks ago, it's mean. I mean, it's like a class 4 rapid that just used to be something that was flat water a few years ago. I haven't been guiding that long, and to get spanked by it a few weeks ago was just such a visceral reminder of like how fast things are changing. And yeah, it's not recommended, but, you know, pretty forgiving.
Awesome. Well, we're going to slowly close out. I want to say a few things. After we're all done with everything today and we're kind of done with the room, come over here, take a look at these scroll maps, take a look at these binders. There's stickers here. There's River Radius stickers on the tables. Please be in touch anytime. If you have cool stories you think are worthy of an episode, send me a message. I want to do a couple thank yous, and then we'll say we're done. So first, thank you, Isabel Adler, Davide Ippolito, Mike Dehoff, Returning Rapids. Thank you for joining us, trusting the process, and coming up here. Thank you to our sponsors for this event, American Rivers and Mike Fiebig and Oars and Tyler and Steve and Carrie and Seth and Bruce and JC and America Outdoors and Karen Short, wherever you are. Thank you, Karen, for trusting this whole thing as well and let me sending you these ideas and doing this. So thank you to all of you. Thank you to these folks. Thank you to the sponsors. Please give a hand to all of them. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having us. Thank you. Thanks, Sam.
And I think we're done. Thank you all, and let's get out of here. Here comes Dave.